Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this year's EASA Annual Safety Conference, held virtually in line with the subject matter and what is top of our minds at the moment. Maybe apart from the current events that are unfolding in the United States, we're happy that so many of you have managed to move away from that and come to join us today. For a few hours, I think that show will still be going on when we've finished. My name is Janet Northcote. I'm the Head of Communications at EASA. I'm going to be guiding you through these 2 days. I'd like to start with just a few housekeeping points. First of all, we're setting all participants to mute. That simply makes a better experience for everybody in this. We're going to start off with 3 speeches, as you can see from the program. During that, we will not be taking any questions. They will simply be spoken. But afterwards, during the panel sessions, we will actually have opportunity for questions, and I will give you some information on exactly how to do that when we get to it. We'll be using the Slido tool at that stage. Now, I'd like to kick off immediately by introducing our first speaker, the Executive Director of EASA, Patrick Key.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, welcome and thank you for joining this first virtual EASA Safety Conference. When we started to prepare for this event, it was in January of this year, we were thinking about other themes such as environment, such as how to be better prepared for the next challenges, the new technologies, innovation, and so on and so forth. We would never have imagined that the COVID crisis would hit our system, our sector, as hard as it hit us. And of course, since it has become, unfortunately, a major part of our everyday life, we could not have this event without centering it on the COVID impact, the consequences, in particular for aviation safety. Let me start by recalling or reminding you of all the things that we have done together in order to deal with this crisis. First of all, in January, when the first signs of the pandemic showed in China, our immediate actions were to start to try and protect our industry from having, in particular, our staff infected by the disease. And we published, as soon as January of this year, the first safety information bulletins which were aiming at protecting the airline crew and explaining what could be the actions, what should be the actions to be taken if there was a sick passenger on board. And then, of course, we were a bit taken by events, and in March, we issued some guidance material, and we worked a lot in order to continue to protect our industry, also trying to start to prepare for the recovery, but also making sure that the ones who would continue to operate under the current circumstances would do it safely. So we worked on the transformation of passenger carriers into cargo carriers. We worked on the extension of the validity of the licenses for pilots and other aviation personnel. We worked on a number of those items in order to make sure that even through an extremely difficult crisis, because there were almost no flights except cargo flights in March and April of this year, we could continue to operate safely. And we started to work on the recovery. And then in April, May, we started really to put things together in terms of what would be needed in order to have a safe recovery of our sector. We created the Return to Normal Operations project within the agency, which was dealing with all the topics which would have to be looked at in terms of oversight, in terms of operations, in terms of validity of licenses, training, and so on and so forth. We also looked and worked on a health safety protocol that we worked on with our colleagues from the European Centre for Disease Control, ECDC, and we are very grateful for their support and their partnership with us for this very important document which was published in May, which I would tend to think that it helped us and our industry start again operations. And we were extremely hopeful in June, July, that indeed the COVID crisis was behind us. Up until, unfortunately, this fall, September, October, where we saw that the recovery was not as good as we would have expected, and that we also needed to prepare ourselves to undertake all the necessary actions in order to make sure that we operate safely the current systems and that we are able to prepare ourselves for a recovery which will be a safe recovery. So our business has changed, our aims have changed, but I hope that we have been able, in all instances, to prepare better ourselves, our partners, and all the stakeholders for safe operations for aviation. Because one thing is for sure, is that we cannot afford, during this crisis, to have safety incidents and safety events. So we need now more than ever to be vigilant on the aviation safety, and this is definitely the subject of this 2 days conference. I would like to thank you all for joining us. We have a record affluence for such an event. 1,500 of you have registered for this event. I am sorry we cannot be in the beautiful city of Friedrichshafen, where this safety conference was supposed to be. But I would like to take the opportunity to thank the German presidency of the European Union for helping us setting up this conference and partnering with us. In particular, I would like to thank wholeheartedly Johann Friedrich Colsman, the Director General of Civil Aviation for Germany, with whom we designed this event and with whom I hope we will share the great success of this conference. I look forward to 2 extremely interesting days with all of you. I hope that despite the format, there will be enough interactions between the panels and the public in order to allow for everyone to get satisfaction on the outcome and the discussions in the different panels. And I wish you a very fruitful discussion. Thank you, and thank you again for joining us.
So thank you very much there, Mr. Keehan, for really setting the scene as to where we are now in the aviation industry in the midst of this pandemic and COVID-19 crisis. Our next speaker is coming from the German side. Germany currently has the presidency for the European Union, and therefore they are actually co-hosting this with us, as was mentioned by Patrick in his speech. I would therefore now like to welcome the Director General of the Civil Aviation for Germany, Johann Friedrich Colsman. Thank you.
Dear EASA hosts, dear Patrick Key, dear colleagues from member states, dear participants from the aviation community, thank you very much for the kind introduction. It is a great pleasure to address you today on behalf of the German Council Presidency. Of course, it would have been a much greater pleasure if we could have welcomed you today personally to Friedrichshafen on Lake Constance. As some of you may know, Friedrichshafen was the cradle of civil aviation 111 years ago, and we had prepared a very interesting and exciting program for you there. But as it has turned out now, it was the perfectly right decision of EASA to have a virtual conference, and I hope that we will soon find another opportunity to meet in Germany. As you probably know, just 4 days ago, we were able to inaugurate the most modern European airport, the Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, taking over from the former Berlin airports. Therefore, on your next trip to Berlin, your baggage tag won't read anymore Tango X-Ray Lima or Sierra X-ray Foxtrot, but simply always Bravo Echo Romeo. But when will be your next trip to Berlin? I'm afraid it's too early to tell. You are all aware of the current situation and you know the figures. Never before has aviation witnessed such a dramatic and lasting drop in passenger numbers. Aviation will be one of the industries that is going to feel the impact of this crisis for a long time to come, despite all our efforts at national, European, and global level. I'm especially grateful for the excellent work EASA has done so far in reaction to this pandemic. But passenger demand and booking behavior have changed. We all notice the repercussion on airlines, airports, ANSPs, plane manufacturers, or the supply industry. Many countries have launched rescue packages, but we are not out of the crisis yet, and much more needs to be done to help stabilizing aviation for the long term. Certainly, the epidemiological situation will continue to determine the way forward. In the meantime, our goal must be to restore the confidence of passengers and to reach a new normal in aviation. It is difficult to tell to which extent the experience of recent months will change people's mobility patterns, but today's conference is an important opportunity to help shaping the way forward together and to discuss how we can best arrive at the new setting. Patrick Key has already outlined the challenges and necessary actions in view of the current COVID crisis. Besides safety and health issues, there are plenty of other problems that arise from the crisis and have to be tackled at EU level. Special provisions for maintaining airport slots, flexibility for air traffic control charges, for licenses and audits, or passenger rights, to name a few. But the fundamental challenges for aviation remain and will certainly return after the crisis. For instance, the issue of air traffic capacity or climate change. It's evident that air transport must continue to play its part in tackling climate change. Sustainable electricity-based fuels can reduce emissions in air transport and make a contribution to combating climate change. Various member states, including Germany, have already welcomed the European Commission's Refuel Aviation initiative, which aims at increasing the share of renewable fuels for air transport. Operational measures and innovative technologies, such as new aircraft with more efficient engines, are an effective tool for making air transport greener. However, currently many airlines do not have the financial means to renew their fleets as planned. Market-based systems can also contribute to substantially to mitigating climate change at a low cost. Other innovations can contribute to sustainability too. Take the Single European Sky, for example. At the EU Aviation Summit, which the German presidency hosted this summer, participants said that the reform of the Single European Sky would be regarded as a building block for achieving our climate change goals within the framework of the Green Deal. In this area, the crisis has clearly shown that the system is not flexible enough. The proposals for the revision of the Single European Sky have already been presented in the Council Working Party, and since the Single European Sky is not designed for the crisis situations, we should seize this opportunity and use the lessons learned from the crisis to create a flexible, dynamic system that can provide capacities according to requirements. It is our shared objective to help aviation to survive and eventually restart so that it can continue doing what makes it so important: delivering goods in a very short time, bringing people to their business meetings, families, or holidays. I wish you a very successful conference and fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colsman. So we're looking for a new normal in aviation, and we're also looking to see how we can pick up on the things which this COVID crisis has thrown out of our way. So things such as sustainability and getting back to the green issues, which really the industry needed to address as well. I'm now going to turn to the final of our 3 opening speeches. We'll be hearing then from somebody who is confronting day-to-day the new normal problems and who is also looking at that longer-term future. So I'm delighted now to welcome Johan Vanneste, who is the President and CEO of Cologne Bonn Airport. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Today I want to focus on 3 main topics of this conference, which is safety, regaining the trust from passengers, and sustainability. First, let me introduce Cologne Bonn Airport to you. Cologne Bonn Airport is a mixed passenger and cargo airport. We are a mid-sized passenger airport with about 13 million passengers in our peak year 2018. But we are also a very important cargo airport, which is, we are the number 8 in Europe with over 800,000 tons of cargo. We are home to 3 important integrators. As you can see on the slide, we have the main hub of UPS, we have FedEx, and we have DHL, all 3 at our airport. And if you're interested, you can always check out Google Earth to see our airport. On top of that, Cologne is also an aerospace hub. We first of all have here in Cologne EASA, but also Cologne is home to the DLR, the German Aerospace Institute. Also home to ESA, the space agency, the airport itself, of course, and then the Flugbereitschaft, that's the fleet of airplanes which are transporting the German ministers and the Bundeskanzler worldwide. During the depths of the crisis, we had hardly any passengers, but we had all the more freight, especially at night, since we are a 24/7 airport. And during the crisis, we also received a lot of overflow from other airports who were hit by Corona, like, for example, Paris, Luxembourg, Liège, who all had to suffer from severe Corona cases in their employment. It was a very interesting time with very unusual visitors from time to time in our airport. Now, the main theme here is safety. And of course, safety, there is crisis or no crisis, safety is always paramount. And obviously, as a business, we looked at savings, we tried to find savings, but where it's concerned safety, we felt very quickly that we could not save any money in this respect. The fire department, the security department, the bird control unit, the tower, all of those departments have to remain open. So either you have a choice, you guarantee the safety and you leave all these open, or you have to close, like several smaller airports have done during this crisis. They simply shut down. I was asked at one time in a press interview, when will you close down? I basically said, over my dead body, we will not close down because we are a 24/7 airport and we have a very important role to play in the transportation of cargo to this Cologne area. I want to give you, in terms of safety, 2 striking examples. We first of all had to guarantee the safety of the safety-related departments, which means, for example, the fire department, if we had someone sick in one shift, infected with Corona, we would have to shut down the airport because we would have to send the whole shift home. And we could not afford this risk. So we decided to close all of these safety-related departments. So no visits, completely shut off from the external world. The second thing is, we are in the middle of a nature preserve, a 5,000 hectare nature preserve. And we clearly felt the pressure from the wildlife. And I want to show this in these graphs. For example, the incidents, simple vehicle incidents, they went like the reduction of the traffic. So we had less traffic and we had less incidents, as you can see in the green graph and the green bar graphs, which present the traffic. But on the other hand, it was as if the wildlife in the nature preserve sensed that there were less aircraft, and our bird control and wildlife people said that there was an enormous pressure from this nature preserve, from animals towards the airport, because of the silence during the day. The animals apparently wanted to find out what's there at the airport. So we had much more incidents with wildlife during this time. Then we have the corona crisis, and we wanted, from day one, we wanted to find out how can we restore the trust of the passengers to fly during this corona crisis and afterwards. And basically, it was all about restoring the trust in the passenger. And if you would ask 100 years ago, would you step into a metal tube flying at 10 kilometers altitude, flying in minus 50 degrees centigrade, you would be seen as crazy. But people have done this day after day. They have trust in this system, in these aircraft, and in the safety of aviation. And this is exactly what we have to do with Corona as well. It's to restore that trust. And what we did is we took several steps, as you can see in this slide. We built a website. We did, of course, all the steps like every airport, which is providing masks in vending machines, having disinfectant everywhere in the terminals, having plexi screens until the gate, video screens everywhere explaining, little brochures, etc. All of this to restore the trust. And we demonstrated this in a press conference, and we had massive interest from various TV stations and from newspapers. And we were actually the first in Germany to do that, to really show the passengers that it's fine to fly. It is safe to fly. Secondly, we installed, together with the city of Cologne, a large test center where people could be tested for corona. Also there, we were amongst the first in Germany to do that. And we even had visitors from the Benelux countries coming to this test center because we were so early in the day to have a test center. And obviously, we have the advantage that we are easy reachable by train, by bus, by car. It was really a success, and we are now close to have tested 100,000 people in this test center. The priority for us now is to get an approval as soon as possible for these quick tests, these fast tests which have been developed, which give a 97% accuracy, which will certainly help to restart the system once the winter season is past and when we have vaccines available. Last but not least, we have sustainability. And sustainability, of course, is here to stay. There is no escaping, and as airports, we have to do our part. We started actually very early on in 2006 by promising we would grow until 2020 with no extra CO2 emissions. So we would grow carbon neutral. And we've achieved this goal. And secondly, we've set ourselves the same goals as ACI Europe. The Airport Association has communicated, which is to reduce by 50% our CO2 emissions in 2030 and to become carbon neutral by 2050. And here you see what we can do as an airport. We have, of course, an advantage as an airport because we have large terminal buildings. We have large aircraft hangars, sorting facilities from our integrators, so it's ideal for solar panels. We also have LED lighting, all the usual stuff that other airports do. But perhaps let me give you one or two examples of quite unusual things we have done. One of that is what you see here in the picture, and which is called in German an Eisspeicher. Eisspeichertechnologie is ice memory technology, if you will, or ice storage technology. In fact, what this is like a giant refrigerator. But it's a refrigerator which you can invert in winter. So in the summer it cools, and in the winter it heats. So what this does is it's a giant hole in the ground, about 20 meters diameter, filled with water, several tubes running through it, connected to a heat exchanger. And what it does in winter, it pulls the heat from the water to heat a large DHL sorting facility. And in doing so, this water turns into ice over the winter. And in summer, we invert the process and we draw the cold from the ice and cool the building, which makes the ice melt again. And all of this is driven by solar panels. It's actually more complicated than I'm explaining it here, but it works wonderfully well, and it's a technology which we will use further in our development. Secondly, we are a great believer in hydrogen power. Hydrogen, we already had a hydrogen filling station at the airport since a couple of years, the very first here in the Cologne area. And one of the things we are now developing is a hydrogen production unit based on solar energy and electrolysis to produce hydrogen, which would power in turn our trucks, our buses, our cars, and our ground support equipment. Lastly, we are located, as I mentioned, in a nature preserve. You can see this on this map. It's actually 5,000 hectares in total, so 50 million square meters. We have over 700 rare animal species there, and it contains water buffaloes, sheep, goats, various water birds, and so far we have been investing over 16 million euro in this nature preserve. Ladies and gentlemen, with this I'd like to thank you for your virtual attention, and I hope you will enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vanneste. Well, we've had a lot of insight here into the various challenges that are facing us at the moment from various different perspectives. I think Mr. Vanneste was able to give us a very good idea of what it's like to be actually on the ground working in an airport at this time and the various challenges that we're facing there. There's a lot of things for us to discuss in this conference.